Yes, you're all set.
And ready for the vacation part, too.
Kevin, do you want to?
Oh, just before you get to Greg, we are going to ask everybody who is listening in on the call, if you have any questions, please type them in the question box, and we will answer them. We're going to try to answer all questions towards the end of the webinar, so please enter any questions that you may have while Greg and Kevin are presenting, and we will answer them as we can. Thank you.
Kevin, do you have anything you wanted to start out with here?
Sorry, I was muted. I'm sorry, Greg. No, what I was just going to, you go through the basic, how they're entering it into the system. So we probably will start in the GPS and just show them those things that should be standouts. Ellie, I highlighted the particular data points that you said you wanted to look at and maybe have a discussion around. So those are the only things, Greg. So.
Did you send me that, Kevin, did you send that to me?
I think Ellie sent it to both of us, but I'll go ahead and send it to you right now.
I did. I sent it yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, I see it here now.
Yeah, I just had the opportunity to highlight them, so I can speak to the particular ones, Greg, once we go through the regular how to enter the information into the Council Max, and then I'll bring up the points that she was asking.
Okay. I'm assuming everybody knows how to generate the GPS itself, okay, once you have the case created. So each level has to be completed. There are some standard ones. I don't know how to correct this echo.
Kevin, are you able to call in? I think the kickback is actually coming from your computer.
So that's what I was asking about. It didn't give a number. It said the code was invalid to call in. So I was trying to mute my computer while Greg was talking, but if it's giving feedback, just let me have the particular conference code to dial in if that's going to change it for you.
You need the call number, Kevin, or the access code?
The access code, because it told me the access code was invalid when I tried to log in, so maybe...
I had no problem. 259-957-776.
Yeah, that's the one that told me it didn't work. So I'll try that. Let me go ahead and mute mine and go to the telephone. So go ahead and continue, Greg.
Okay. Well, the echo seems to have died down now. Is that?
Yep.
Okay.
Probably because Kevin got off.
Got off, yeah. Okay. Your designate level is if it's a level 1, level 2, 1 and 2, or a level 4. There's nothing unique about that. Grantor, you have a set list of grantors to choose from? No, you don't. Sorry. Intake, nothing unique here. Anything that's red is required, okay, with a red asterisk, okay? Here we have one with a default reason. There's nothing entered here. Same with the household occupants. Since this is Fred Flintstone, let's say that they're married with children. We can pick anybody have a favorite here? Reduction in income. We save it. And over here at the
back
end.
To subject property there, Greg? Back on that section.
Let me finish that one. Oh, there's your, I'm not sure who used, I'm just going to pick one. Okay. What was the question here?
Subject property?
Oh, that can be different than the intake. Okay. And most often it's due to a P.O. box at one or the other. Okay. So one may have, your intake address may be a P.O. box, or they may be staying somewhere else. It's not the subject property. It can be different. So this is where they currently are residing, or again, if it's a P.O. box for their mailing address, and then when you're in the actual GPS, the subject property is the true physical address for the dwelling. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So we can complete that. Now, this is unique for you guys. This is the HOPP intake. Okay. It's your ID number, which is 8 digits, whatever you make up.
If
The number
there
of
is
children.
one. No.
Yes. Okay.
The HOPP ID is if you get a client who is referred via the HOPP referral hotline.
Okay.
That's the only time that needs to be filled in.
Right, and you'll notice that it's not a required field for that, so it's available only when you have that actual referral.
Okay. Number of children, 0 to 17, number of adults, number of seniors. Do you specify what a senior age is? What constitutes a senior?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
it's
do.
over 65, right, Alex?
I think it's actually over 62.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, it's in their data points.
Okay. So as long
So
as
a
you
question that we have
defined
that Alex and I had here, Greg, is
mm-hmm.
if he puts in that there's 2 adults, but then puts 1 senior, does that mean that the system is going to list that there's 3 adults, or will it still list that there's 2 adults?
It'll list 3 on your report. This isn't for NeighborWorks, this is just for your report, so it would list 3.
So then if there's 4 adults in the house, but one of them is a senior over 62, we'd only put 3 under adults and 1 under seniors.
Correct.
Yes, then that was one of their questions, Greg. So I'm going to kind of feed you their questions that they
okay.
emailed as well as you go through. So.
Same as if, let's say there were 4 children in the house and one of them was over the age of 17, you'd have 3 children, possibly 3 adults. Could be 2 adults and a senior. It depends on the makeup of, of the household over that.
Understood.
Okay. And then the intake date is critical. On your reporting, it counts from max, date and timestamp, just about everything you do. So when you create a client, there's a field you don't necessarily see unless you look at a particular report on the date that client record was created. And then when you create a case, which in this case is your foreclosure mitigation case, there's a date stamp for when that happened, including the time that it happened. For most of the HUD reports and NeighborWorks reports and things like that, we use those default dates. But for the HOPP, you guys control what the intake date is. So in CounselorMax, you may have created the client in the case today, but the intake date was actually last week, okay? And that could make a difference if you're crossing months or quarters, depending on your reporting. So you are in control of the intake date for the HOPP purposes. And this is a critical date. Okay. Your authorization, this is kind of like your opt-out form, also usually giving the client giving the organization authorization to use their data for reporting. So people either opt in or opt out of this. If they give the release, then obviously you check the box. And in most reports, it'll include the client's name and or address if the report is designed to have that. If it's a particular report that does have typically the name and address, but this is not checked, it's going to exclude the client's name, okay? Because that would be personal identifiable address, for example, so it would mask out the name, okay? In some reports, it masks out the address, so it just depends on the report, but just to understand, and you're in full control of this form. It's under the admin menu. You can design it per agency based on your policies and who you report to, notifying the client, okay? So that's the whole reason for the authorization form. Okay. Counseling mode, notice that there's nothing here as far as a link directly to the counseling module. However, there is up here. So if you're in here and you want to schedule an appointment, you can click on appointment or log. It'll take you directly to that, to the calendar for appointments, okay, or to the log, okay. And again, it's for that client. So that's just a quick way of getting to the calendar and to the log. Also classes, if you wanted to sign them up. If there were any classes in your system, you could go directly there to sign that client up. Okay. Just indicate that you have indeed scheduled an appointment. We'll say it was face-to-face. Now, Kevin, do you know offhand, I think most of the reports we do, it actually checks to see if there is appointment for this client in order for it to report.
To report,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. So just entering here that you've done a face-to-face isn't sufficient. It's actually going to come in to and look and see if there are any appointments for this client. I'm sorry, one. Okay. We created the work plan, but there's no appointments actually for the client in the calendar, and there is one here in the log, and it is appointment. Keep in mind, when you're entering these, you have to use a subject of appointment, or they will not report. The report will indicate there was no counseling provided. Okay, so it's looking for the subject of appointment in order for it to report. And it's not just for HOPP, it goes for HUD as well, or even NeighborWorks, okay, reporting. If any one-on-one counseling session with a client, the subject must be appointment. There's a way around it. We're not going to get into it on this call, but for all practical purposes, for the calendar and for the log, if you're having a one-on-one that you want to get credit for HOPP, for NeighborWorks, for HUD, the subject must be appointment, APPT. Okay. So we do have one in here. See what the duration is. Okay. And note this is in minutes. So this is an hour and 15-minute initial appointment. The property is the same as up here, the subject property. It's just another way to get to it. So you can either go intake, click subject property. You can hit property, and you can go back to client. So it's the same screen. It's just listed twice. Not everybody switches back and forth here. Credit report, if you're signed up with Credco, you can go out and pull the credit report. It'll populate the assets, liabilities, and if it's a tri-score, in other words, all three bureaus, it's going to automatically select the middle score. If there's 3, if there's 2, it's going to pick the lower score, and if there's 1, obviously it's going to pick the 1. You can manually enter the scores themselves. This has already been entered. Well, the one has been entered, the other one hasn't. So the primary and then your co-applicants, same thing. You can enter the scores for both. Liabilities, again, if you've used the CredCo option, it's going to pre-populate your liabilities. You enter them per applicant or co-applicant. So you have Fred and Wilma here. So you would enter them. If it's a joint account, pick one. There's no way to indicate it's a joint. Most people put it under their primary, but if it's joint account, technically it can go under either one. Correct, Kevin?
That is correct.
Okay. Not required. If you start to enter, then the red, items with the red asterisk are required, but it's not required for the work plan itself. Income, you're going to have to enter this. It does not come through in the credit reports. If you do not enter this, it's automatically going to use the household income that you indicated in the outreach down here. So this is more of an estimated, what the client told you on a form when they walked in the door and they filled it all out and they say, oh, we make $45,000 a year. And a lot of agencies just go ahead and use that, verify that, but it does have the option to actually enter the employer, their start date, and that the other information. And then there's other income. So if it is not by employment, then you have your alimony, bonuses, child support, commissions, others. This is customizable. Keep in mind, if you upload to HOPP or MHA, you can only use the blue-colored default options. Customized ones will show up in red. Specifically for MHA, they're very particular on the income types. So I just want to point that out while we're in here. And the same thing with liabilities. I mean, but most of the errors I get calls on MHA are because the income, they've used some custom type of income they've used and not one of the default ones. And their MHA system is defined to only use the predefined list. Okay. Our liens. Okay. Somebody's already added part of one in here. Your lender, your lien holder name, the holder type. This is where your status comes out on your report. Okay. 120 plus, 30 to 60, 61 to 90, 91 to 120, or current. Your investor. Payment type. Fixed. Let me change, if I can, this. Resolution's a little, there, is that better?
Yes.
Yes, much.
Yeah. Full document provided, lien position, your current servicer required, your term type, your original lien holder, payment prior to rate change if there was one. If there's any mortgage insurance, interest only, your rate. Trying to think if any of these are required for your program, even though they're not red asterisks.
The original lien holder and original loan number are not required, but requested if available.
That's what yeah. So these two, though they don't have a red asterisk is kind of default for the universe, not necessary HOPP. So as Ellie was saying, this will report if you have the information. So if you have the original lien holder and original loan number, this is where you enter them to get it to report.
Same thing with the servicer loan number.
Yes. Okay. So you, this is the standard, your current value. Okay, what you're requesting. Okay, and the status of that request. Any comments? These are additional just for HOPP, servicing standard violations, if any. Okay.
Could you back up to the foreclosure at intake question, which is right under HOPP initial intake fields there?
Oh, yes.
Stuart,
okay.
Right. So just so everybody on this call knows, this answer needs to be no, unless the homeowner that you're working with has actually already experienced a full and complete foreclosure. This question is asking if you are working with a homeowner who's already lost their home.
Right. So it
if
should
you
say
answer
foreclose
yes,
at intake. Yes.
Right. If you answer
right.
yes
Just to let
this
everyone know that if you select yes on this field, it will show up on the HOPP report. The loan status will say foreclosed.
Right.
Correct.
It will override any other choice you made previously about the status of the loan, as in 90 to 120 days late and so on.
Correct.
So I anticipate 99.9% of the time y'all are going to answer no to this question.
Okay. So we're down here to the bottom. Again, the servicing standard violations, if any, there's a predefined list. Okay. Servicer change during interaction, yes or no? Number of settlement conference appearances, that's just a straight number. Bad faith motion, yes or no?
So before we go away from the screen, a comment about the number of settlement conference appearances. Alex, I'll let you explain that because you have it more clear in your head than I do, I think.
Me too. So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, yet the settlement conferences, will that accumulate over time? Is this a cumulative number?
No, it won't. Well, you'd have to change it. It's going to stay there until you change it.
Okay. So for our grantees, what we do, at least for Empire Justice, we ask you to report the number of settlement conferences per reporting period. So you just need to be cognizant of the fact that unless you manually update this field, it will export per reporting period. And that we tally that total number.
Yeah. So what she's saying is if you report this client on multiple months, okay, if you're reporting monthly, you reported them last month and you said there was 2 appearances and you don't change it, it's going to report again 2 for the next month, and then they're going to add those together as 4. So you need to update this if necessary or as necessary. So if you didn't have any the second month, you need to change that to 0 so that the cumulative on the HOPP side, once they tally them, is correct.
Yep.
Okay. One other thing under the servicing standards, if I can find it, isn't this where where's the lease pens? I think it's what it's, oh, here it is. If you enter a date here, and I don't know what this term means because I'm not from New York, so pardon me, but I do know that if you enter a date in here on your loan status, it's going to indicate this pendant, okay, as the status.
Rather than the 90 to 120 days late?
Yeah.
Correct. And that's by design. So it's there's two things that if you don't see your days of 30 to 60, 60 to 90, whatever, it's going to have two other options. It's because you had the foreclosure and it's going to say foreclosed, or if there's a date in here, it's going to say less pendants filed or filing or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it puts on the report, but just so that you do know that that's what. Can I ask, for my own purposes, what is the lease pendants? List pendants?
It's the date at which the lender files saying they want to foreclose on the property.
Okay.
That's a very non-legal way of explaining that.
No, hey, that's direct and to the point. I get it.
We appreciate that explanation,
Yeah.
Allie.
Yes. So, everybody clear on this? All these HOPP specific? I notice there's no red asterisks there, so they're not, well, there is one here. But, so the rest of them are desired if applicable, but aren't necessarily indicated as required. Correct?
Yes.
If you have it, you should be reporting it. That's
right.
We have mandatory fields. Yet because every field we ask that you do the best to your ability in obtaining the information and reporting it. So if you have the information, please fill that in.
Right.
The only thing that I will say about that page is if you have put a servicing violation, servicing standards violation in, if you have actually selected one of those, I would ask you to consider filing a complaint based on that servicing violation.
Okay. So that was for the first. If you had a second, then you hit add new, and you start all over again, but the lien position would need to say second. And if you have a third, you're going to say third or whatever. Only the first and second get reported on the HOPP report?
Yes, the second lien gets reported. Yep.
Right, if there is one, yes. But if there would be a third, do you allow even third? Are thirds allowed? I'm just saying, that to be cognizant of the lien position, because the first and the second are the ones that get reported to HOPP.
It's very rare, Ellie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there will be a third lien, correct?
Yeah, it is rare, but we do have the field available if an agency comes across somebody who has it. And it's an issue regarding the modification.
Okay. Budgets, don't have any selected for this account. I'm sure you're all familiar with the budget. It's not required. It's in there. Okay. Counseling mode for level 2. Again, typically face-to-face. Can be phone, could be video conference. The updated budget for 2. We really don't need to go through the rest of the level 2 stuff. HOPP counseling, okay. Primary reason, distress reason. Secondary mortgage distress reason, primary counseling, and then if there's a second, same, those two. Oh, I'm sorry. Secondary counseling, primary Sandy-related services, secondary Sandy-related services, if applicable. And then our outcome. Again, this
Which everybody needs to know does not need to be completed every time that you do your report. That outcome, the primary outcome, only needs to be filled in when you actually have an outcome. So you've completed a modification, a homeowner has gotten a modification, or you're closing the case due to lack of contact or because you're done with them, then you would put a primary outcome.
Yeah.
You don't
Currently,
need to do a primary outcome every time that you're submitting a report.
Yeah. The equivalent of the HUD reporting currently in process or currently receiving counseling or whatever, you know, that what she's saying is if it's that status, you don't need to put anything here. It's when there is a either a positive or a negative outcome, you know, but there is an outcome to the case. This is what she's saying. And notice they're separate for the first and second lien.
Right. And you would, the only time that you would need to put client outcome unknown as the primary outcome is when you close the client for whatever reason and you don't know what the outcome is. You know, maybe they withdrew and just dropped off the face of the earth. That's the only time that you would put that in there.
Okay. And then the new housing, if they're foreclosed, I'm assuming this is what then you want to know what happened to them afterwards?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, we do have a couple fields that are not available in the GPS. So in which case you have to go to Client Profile and the Subject Property, and the closing is the closing date initially when the house is purchased is the date that goes in here, or the house purchase date, one or the other. I mean, it's typically, you know, that day or day later maybe. But this is where the purchase date, I forget the exact name on your report, Ellie, if you can refresh my memory.
It is purchase date.
Purchase date, yes. Okay, so Councilor Max, it's called the closing date, but it's just a different word for the same thing. So this is where you enter that date. And there's a lot of people that I know were having difficulty getting it to populate on the report, and this is where it gets entered. Okay, so we're in our case profile, subject property, the closing date.
Yeah, and this may feel counterintuitive for some of the Councilor Max users because this is where they usually would put a first-time home buyer's information on the property that they purchased. But for the HOPP report, this is where some of the data comes from. So just put the homeowner's home information in here, even though it may not be where you normally would do it for a foreclosure client.
The screen can be used in a lot of different ways, Ellie. It could be used for existing homeowner for rehab. It could be used for, this is classic. I mean, not many people use this screen actually anymore, I don't think. Kevin could answer that better. But it could be used, it just depends on the type of service you're providing the client. So just think that when you're doing foreclosures, it's the initial subject property data that you're providing here. What was the original purchase price, you know, at the time? Was it an REO? What was the date? You know, the MSA area, things like that, so that it's a historical data about the property.
Yeah, Greg is correct. You can put that information there, and it can be used for any type of service. It is true, Ellie, that it was geared towards subject property was for purchase information, but you can also capture any of the data there, as Greg said, and have that historical in the system for the information to be able to report for HOPP, which is obviously mortgage default activity. So.
Is there anything else in this case profile section that specifically pulls for the HOPP report?
No.
Besides under subject property?
Yeah, no. If you notice, most of them are just replicates of the GPS. Okay, it's just it was the classic way to get in here before the GPSs were designed. And for whatever reason, on the subject property in the GPS, they didn't enter the closing or purchase date. I'm not sure why. For foreclosure mitigation, they did not.
I just didn't put anything in there.
Yeah, but what I was saying is here, when you're on the property
I
the
gotcha.
GPS, there's nowhere to indicate the that date. it's the same information. Notice, that, okay, let's say I'm going to change road abbreviated to ROAD, save it. And now when I go back and refresh, notice it says road. Okay, so it's the same data. It's just for whatever reason, this particular field didn't get added on the GPS.
Got it.
Okay. So, I mean, you may find, as an agency, a lot of this data to be valuable. You know, market value, you know, other things, you know, on here, and that just because it's not in the GPS doesn't mean you can't use it and then run a custom report to get some of that information out. Okay, so just because it's not on the GPS, check here. We have agencies that they want to track particular things, and it's not on the GPS, and they forget to come look here and see if it was in the classic profile. But for your report, this date is required. So let's say 3/1/1995. Once purchase price. I don't know what you have in there, but okay. I think we've covered the data points, have we not, Ellie?
So I'll just ask you a couple of questions then.
Yeah. Well,
The intake principal and original mortgage amounts, where does this info need to get input for it to show on the HOPP report?
I'm sorry, again, the
Intake principal and original mortgage amounts.
Yeah, Maline's.
there's a place on here for the original loan amount, and I'm
so let me ask on that. On when you say original loan amount,
here's the original loan amount.
It's down in the
here's the original loan amount. Okay, and then that based on the original term. Okay.
So let me ask, Ellie, you phrased this as a question about intake principal and original mortgage amount. So is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Because those are two different things. So when you're talking about the principal that's still owed on it, that's actually going to be up in the next section above. So that's principal balance current. That's where you're actually populating the intake principal, what's left on it. And then as he showed the loan amount at origination, that's going to be the mortgage amount.
Okay. I just want these are questions I want to have pointed out to the
Sure.
webinar. So just so everybody's clear about where this information is coming from.
Absolutely, and that's actually where I was going to go to because I'm looking at your list, and Greg is, while he's operating this, I could feed him the questions so we can answer those. Your next question. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go for it. I said great.
Okay. So your next one was in regards to the counselor choosing yes on foreclosure at intake. So I think because Greg kind of went over that, we stopped and we reiterated that if they make that selection, then CouncilMax determines that that actually means the property is foreclosed at that time. And so I think we've answered that. Do you feel like we should go back over that, or?
No, I'm good, unless
Okay.
Alex is seeing that a participant has a question specifically about it.
Nope, there's no questions about it. And just to remind everybody who's listening in, if you do have any questions, please type them into the question box, and we'll answer them as we go forward.
Okay, great. So the next one you had here was the purchase date on the HOPP report is derived from closing date, and that's actually in the subject property section, and Greg just did a wonderful job displaying that. That's inside the case profile, so everybody should know where that is. And again, you know, the report's going to pull this information, even though it's not in the GPS, which is where they're using most of the other fields, right? It will still pull this information here out of the case profile. So it's just a slight detour that they would have to do to be able to save that, and then the system's going to do that. Let's see, what else do you have here? The origination date being derived. So I'm not quite sure when you say origination date, are we talking about the case? Or are we talking about
the current loan? The current loan, Kevin. Okay, and that is derived on, okay, we have a known date now, okay. It was a 30-year loan, which is 360, okay, and you're saying that there are 300 payments left, so there's 60 months have gone by or 5 years ago. So that's how it's determining when the loan, this mortgage was taken out.
So to be clear with everybody who's watching this, each time that you are preparing your report, that's going to need to be updated, because otherwise your origination date is going to repeatedly change. Because if you leave 300 in there, it's going to calculate according to the 300 months remaining and change the origination date.
So if you report this month, next month you need to change this to 299 is what she's saying.
Correct. Because we noticed that people's origination dates were changing, and this is the reason.
It makes sense, yeah.
And that's a great point, Ellie, because that should be updated anyway. So you want to keep your file as close to accurate as possible. So right. Council Max is going to let that remain static. So even as months pass, so you're going to want to update that as the normal course of your counseling activity anyway, so that you have the most complete and accurate information in the client management system for you. So, all right. The next thing Ellie wanted to talk about were the data fields that must be completed in order for the client to appear in the report. So I think we've covered that. All the required fields are there in the system, so we've marked those things with red asterisks. But as Alex said so eloquently earlier, the other fields that are also there for the HOPP intake and counseling, if you have that data, you also want that data put into the system as well. But if you're hitting on all the required red asterisk fields, that's going to populate the things on the report, with the exception of you got to come back out, right? And we looked at the case profile where we were putting the date in on the case profile. So that's the only thing where you're actually going to take the detour out of the GPS to be able to fill that in to get that information into the report. Was there another area, Greg, that you think that a lot of people are probably missing that's not fulfilling the whole requirement there?
No, I think covering the critical date on when the case created. Okay. Okay. Now I've got to find it. Intake date. This date. Okay. The appointments must, the calendar and the events must be appointments, APPTS.
Correct.
Because if it doesn't find those, then it tells you that there's no counseling.
Right.
And we had a number of people, and they said, well, I have all these in there, and it's typically because the subject type wasn't listed as log. As appointments. So whether you're using the calendar or the event, you need to have the subject as appointment.
Correct. And as a good point, you don't want to, we always say you can customize Council Max as much or as little as you'd like to, but that's one of the areas where we don't want you to over-customize the system. So I've seen people put in an extra section on appointments, and so that creates confusion in your Council Max, because which one should the counselor be selecting? And we need that appointment to show up in the system in order for Council Max to actually count it when it's time to report. So you don't want to over-customize that.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Sure,
The next question. This is Alex. We have a couple questions in regards back to the origination date, and our grantees are pointing out some very good points. It's very onerous for them to go back through and update hundreds of files. every time, just to make sure that data field changes, right? Is there any way we
They're
can?
in the lean section, Greg.
Sorry.
I was just, Greg is driving, so I was just pointing him back to where the question is. So go ahead.
But, no, and I don't know if this is possible, but is there any way we can, there's either to update that as we go forward or to make sure that date remains stagnant?
You're asking for a
or anything
shortcut.
like, yeah, shortcut.
Because, you know, some of the groups have 300 or 400 clients that they're reporting to us every reporting period. And so the point is, they're saying, you know, to go back and have to update 300 or 400 clients in their term of months remaining is onerous. And that can, you know, they're not necessarily going to touch every single one of those clients every 30 to 60 days.
Right. I can't think of a way to automate it. They always have the option of just changing the date in the Excel file before they send it, but I can't think of anything offhand. Kevin, can you on?
No, that's what I was just sitting here. Because it is the same manual process for everybody across the board, Ellie and Counselor Max. So
Right.
I don't really know a way of automating that just for the HOPP requirement there. That's something I'll take back and see if there's another way that we can get some of that information. But off the top of our heads, it's a manual process for anybody using Counselor Max. So yeah, I'm not quite sure how to automate that.
Well, and we get the same thing for using financial capability, some of the other tools in here where every month they got to key in what's the new savings balance, what's the the new debt balance, all the other things in order to get trends and everything else like that. So I mean, we're looking at some different things, but I can't on this one. I can't think of. I mean, because you could technically have a button that would update all records, but what if somebody didn't make their payment, or you have half your clients that aren't making payments? Then the term, you still counting it down, or is it suspended?
Right.
What's the
then
case?
the system.
That
the
doesn't
system
change
is assuming.
the origination date.
Yeah.
Just because they've missed payments doesn't change the date that the mortgage was originated.
Well, the way it's calculating it does. The other option would be to have a date field to when the original mortgage was closed. The mortgage date. Having a field.
That's the only thing I can see is you'd have to add a field that would talk about the origination date.
So for this loan, you've got the current loan information, and you would have the date that loan was originated is the only way you could do it, because right now it's computing based on the original term and the number of months left.
Right.
I hear you.
Right, and I personally lean towards the date field just so it's right there, but perhaps we can talk that afterwards, after the call.
Yeah, I was going to say that's something, we'll have to go back, because that would fundamentally change the page in Counselor Max. So that's something we'd have to talk about offline.
So the other, I do have one question though that I wonder if somebody manually put the origination date on our spreadsheet, what could they put in the term months remaining to stop it from changing that date? Because it looks like it's a required field.
It is a required field,
it is,
and it's going to compute every month. Every time you run the report, every month when you run the report, it's going to compute it and populate that date on the HOPP spreadsheet. Okay, so they'd have to manually go in after they export the spreadsheet, change those dates before they send it to you.
Okay. All right. Well, like you said, we can talk offline more about this, and Alex and I can see if we can talk about some way to make it easy when they do the report to us. But on to the next thing.
It may be that other users may find that date desirable as well, instead of having to compute. So, I mean, Kevin, we'll take it back and we'll talk as a group and see if it's a viable field to add.
Right.
At this stage of the game, it's probably going to have to be added for everybody or not at all.
Right, exactly.
Right,
because
right.
this feeds all of our mortgage defaults. So that's what I said. It's going to require a little more thought because it's not just what impacts HOPP in this particular instance. So it would fundamentally affect all Council Max users right here. Right. So.
And they might not have the date, and so if we add it, it might be just no red asterisk are required, but just be there. I mean, you would think they would have the date, but they may not have it available when they're entering the data. And there's nothing worse than trying to enter a screen that has a required field and you don't have the field that data at hand. So, you know, we just need to think through all that and see what the impact is going to be.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Greg, let's see. How is the service date derived? Since we're talking about derived fields.
That's what we talked. Well, it's not a service date. It's the one it's the intake date. Is that separate from the service date?
Yes.
Yes.
There's an intake date because there's the date that they did the intake, and then there's each reporting period they're supposed to update the service date. Like this month I saw, you know, this reporting period I saw them on January 21st. Because if they don't have a service date within the reporting period, we don't count that as a client served during that reporting period.
So what?
I would guesstimate that it's coming off appointments.
I was going to say, how are you determining that a service is that actual log entry? Is that calendar? Is it?
Well,
I'm not quite sure, Ellie, how you. I'm sorry.
That's my question.
I'm not quite sure where you're getting that particular field from. So so as Greg is showing you the screen right now, there are things that we call services that are occurring inside Council Max. You know, we don't exactly call them services, but everything that had a completion date there is an actual date that particular service was supposed to have taken place. But these aren't derived at all. These are actual dates that whatever you did occurred, and you say complete, and Council Max will populate the date, and of course, if that date's off, you have the opportunity to change it. But I'm not sure when you say service dates, if that's what you're talking about, the actual activities, or is it something related to the case itself? So that's what I didn't understand when I read this.
I'm
this date changes. I'm looking at the data point. It's B5, service date. It says description. Enter the date the client received services from your organization. Use the month, day, year. This date changes each time the client receives services from your organization, and changes will be tracked automatically. So this is going to be triggered off your appointments, okay, in the calendar or in the log or education.
Okay, so that's the question. That's what I want to make sure that the people on the webinar understand, how that gets updated on their report, so that they understand when they do a service, they have to put it into the appointments in order for it to update on the report.
Right. So it's going to either have to be that they attended a class, you have an appointment for them, okay, in the date range of the reporting, and it is an appointment, okay, or a log entry. It is an appointment, and the date was in the reporting period.
Okay.
And so, everybody remember, the duration is minutes. I've had several where it's listed as 1, and I think they mean an hour, because I know for HUD, a 1-minute appointment will not report. And NeighborWorks, I don't think, reports either. So even though it says minutes, I know a lot of counselors just, I met with them an hour, and they put a 1 in there. So it is truly minutes.
And does that accumulate on the report? If you have 5 appointments that are 15 minutes each, does it accumulate on the report for the period saying that it's an hour and 15 minutes or 75 minutes?
I would suspect. I'd have to double check that. I'd have to double check it, to be honest with you.
I asked the question because we are asking the grantees to report to us their total amount of time spent with the client to date, not just the time in the reporting period, but the total to date.
So Ellie, and forgive me because I'm not sure if that's an actual column on the, so that is, the time is being reported on the HOPP report?
Yes.
Yep.
And it's,
Service hours.
and that, but that report is running through a specific period, so it's probably only dealing with the period that you've told it to report out.
So then we need to accumulate, because we can do that. That's why there's a question about it. Like, if what Counselor Max does is provide only the time within the reporting period, that's fine as long as we know that, because then we can adjust our system to accumulate the time.
Okay.
But if
yeah.
Max accumulates the time, we don't want to then also accumulate it. You understand what I'm saying?
It does it both, but it sounds like for the purposes of your report, it's only doing it in the reporting period. But CouncilMax is always keeping track of all time cumulative. That's just, in fact, you can look at all your clients and run another report. Each one of your affiliates can run a report and see exactly what each counselor has done over time with any client, and they have access to that. And of course, that's from the beginning at the time the case was open, and it'll show all that time. But I believe that your report is only looking at that specific time period that they're pulling the information there. So it's not a limitation that CouncilMax doesn't give you the time cumulative. It's just the way the report was done, you were looking at a specific period.
No, there's no issue one way or the other. Whichever way it does it, we just need to know.
To know,
Okay.
yeah. What's the do you know the data point number for that, Ellie?
I am looking it up.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too.
I'm looking too, and I don't.
It is the House Legal Services Manual. It's data point E40. And I just want to be cognizant because it is after 1 o'clock. But Greg, if you could confirm where the service date derives from, because a couple of our grantees are reporting that it's not pulling by the appointment date. So if we could confirm that and just see where that information is coming from, just so they can make sure their reports show all the clients they service, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely do that. And again, that's an area that's rife with the customization. Remember I talked about that? So if they've created their own appointment section and they're using that, CouncilMax isn't counting that because it's something they created in the system. So we'll double back on that one as well.
There are a few items. I don't know if people on the webinar can stay on. Are people dropping off, Alex?
No, people are staying on. Yeah, if anybody needs to leave, that's fine. We are recording this webinar, and we will post it in the portal. We'll send you an email once it's up. So if you need to leave, that's fine. If you have any questions that you would like answered, please type them into the question box, and we will clarify that.
So Alex,
and Kevin and Greg, can you stay?
Yeah, I can for a little bit.
Yeah, I have a little bit of time.
Okay.
Alex, you said E40 is where you see...
It's 38.
Oh, it's E38.
It's E38 in the current.
Okay, E38, okay.
It's right under services provided. And I'm wondering if you're looking at the old data manual.
No, I see it under E38.
Okay, yep, but the new data manual, it's actually data point E40, but I'll make sure you have the most up.
Well, maybe, yeah. On ours, or mine, it says E38, so.
Okay.
That's the one I have also.
Okay, well, I'll send that to you both.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll have to check this one because I believe for the purposes of this report, it was only looking at your reporting period for that. But CouncilMax does accumulate the time, so I mean it's 6 eggs in one hand, half a dozen in the other. It was just the way we set up the report. I think in the beginning was based on the reporting period that you were looking for.
So it was my understanding from one of the conversations that we had with regarding how the report polls that even though people put in a date range, that the way the system is set up and designed, all HOPP clients are pulled onto the report. Whether
If they were created in the period, if there was action in the period, or they're open within the period. That's this original specification. I can double check the,
So the only reason that a client in HOPP would not be pulled onto the report who's already been on the report previously would be because you closed them. Otherwise, every time you pull the report, you're going to get every client that you have open in the HOPP network. I just want everybody on the line to be clear about that, because I think the question is coming up from some of the people on the line because they're seeing that clients they did not service during the period are still showing up on their report. And we want them to. Just so everybody's clear, we want to see everybody that they have open, even if they didn't provide them a service during the period.
But on that note, just note that the service date, that's why it's so important, is only clients who have a service date within the reporting period. Those fields will be updated or added to your total client served. Okay.
Are you getting any questions about that stuff, Alex?
Not in regards to that. I have a couple as we go forward, but
okay,
we'll get to them.
Okay. Let me, another thing Ellie, you sent was case number versus client ID. So you want to elaborate on that, and maybe we could explain where that's coming from?
Yeah, so just so that everybody is aware, the way, most of you probably are aware of this, but the way that Counselor Max is designed, when you enter a brand new person who's never been in the system before, they are assigned a client number. That client number never changes. What does change is the case number, so that if you see somebody for a pre-purchase issue and then you see them for a foreclosure issue, they're going to have a different case number for the pre-purchase and a different number for foreclosure. So what pulls onto the HOPP report is the case number, not the client number. So just to be clear about that.
The report says client number, but what's using out of Counselor Max is the case number.
Correct.
Okay? Because it has to be unique. Because you may have a client that's come in twice. They've gone through this process the second time. You don't want to re-report the first one. So you're going to report the current case number as the client number.
So this got confusing when people went from not having Counselor Max or not using Counselor Max to derive their report to when we got this designed, and then they pulled their clients, and they had been reporting to us client number because that's how we named the data point field. So when they started pulling directly out of Counselor Max was pulling case number. So to us it looked like it was changing the number. So going forward, it's the case number that should be what is under client ID.
And a few weeks ago, we did a WebEx how to create a custom report to be able to cross-reference client numbers with case numbers and such. We didn't record that, did we, Ellie, or did we?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah, but it's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward and easy to do.
Nope, sorry, Greg. We did record it. Actually, the quality is not good, to say the least.
Okay.
But go into the portal, our HOPP portal, and grantees are able to at least follow along. The audio is it's tough to hear, but you can at least see the visual and steps on how to pull that custom report.
All right. So data points 19 and 20, you both have referenced. So that's a secondary reason for mortgage distress. And I do believe we did cover that, actually, as well as the number of units on the mortgage.
No. So remember, you have an outdated
that's right.
manual. So
we need your 19 and 20. So you go ahead and tell us.
D19 is primary reason for mortgage distress, and D20 is secondary reason for mortgage distress.
Okay.
And I think we just wanted to point out to people that they needed to fill in something for data point D19, which was the primary reason for mortgage distress, but they were not required to fill in something for D20. They could if they wanted to. Is that what we wanted to cover on that, Alex? Anything else?
Yep, just if there is a secondary reason, fill that in. Yeah, if not, you do not have to fill in that field.
Right.
Okay. So again, we're looking at the HOPP counseling, which is at the bottom of the GPS. Okay. So your primary reason and secondary reason.
Right.
Secondary is optional, but primary is required.
And primary counseling is required.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so now, Alex, I'll rely on you then because we don't have the right playbook. You said data point D35, so just go ahead and throw that out for us.
Okay. That is the servicing standard violations, which I believe we went over.
We did. Okay.
Yep.
And E41?
That is the type of the housing counseling assistance provided, which essentially is the same, goes for the same as the reasons for distress. If there is a secondary reason for, or secondary counseling service provided, fill that in. Yet if not, you do not have to fill it in.
And I think we wanted to point out here that, for instance, one of the options under the type of housing counseling assistance is assisted with relocation, and you are then required to fill in information about the new house, their new living situation. And I believe we pointed out where those things were. Right. So one of my questions was where does the information, all right, so here we go. New housing type, the short sale date, the short sale price,
Deed in lieu, any forbearance amounts.
I don't see, because one of the things that they are supposed to fill out is the amount of a partial claim, if they had that with an FHA mortgage. Is there some place to put that in?
Is that under financing, Kevin?
I was getting ready to say it's only going to appear in the financing for them to be able to show the partial claim.
And it's on the lien screen.
So you said it's in the liens, Alex?
Yep, that's what one of our grantees is helping us out.
Where exactly would they enter that? Ask them that.
The modified value. Thanks, Joni.
Okay, so
I can count the modified values.
yeah, and now CouncilMax isn't doing anything with the data you put in those fields. That's why they're not required. So if if they are using that to put that information there, CouncilMax isn't doing anything with it.
So you're saying it's not going to show up on the report?
Yeah, modified values has. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, no, I just say it doesn't display on any of our standard reports. On the HOPP report, your user might be able to tell us more than we know on that particular one.
On the HOPP report.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Joni.
Thank you, Joni.
Yes, thank you, Joni. We all learn something all the time.
Yes.
Okay, the next,
Alan? Yeah.
The next data points were E45, which
And
is modification request status.
Yep, so I think what we wanted to point out that is if you achieve the final mod, you need to also, so you have a mod status of final mod accepted and received. You need to also report that in the outcome section in order to receive, because the mortgage modified value is a foreclosure prevented outcome. So make sure you report that to receive that credit.
So in other words, just
here.
putting it under modification request status, under mod status, does not fulfill foreclosure prevented.
Right.
This is the workout status.
Right.
You want to know the actual status.
This is the workout status, and then under primary outcome, it gives you the final outcome.
Gotcha.
So if you have put mortgage modified under mod status, you must then go to the primary outcome data point and list mortgage modified HAMP, mortgage modified NMS, mortgage modified in-house, whichever one is correct, in order to get the credit for a modified mortgage as an outcome.
And that's a credit for HOPP.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, because NFMC is different, and so is HUD.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, Ellie?
So then the final data point that I have listed here is the last data point, and that's on case closure. And regarding closing cases, a couple of things, we've said this a few times, but if you close a case and then they come back to you, you must use the same case number. You don't use a new case number. The OAG wants to track a homeowner through the process. They don't want to, they're not as interested in different levels of service as much as one homeowner and what happened through the process. So if you close and then reopen, use the same case number.
Right.
And then also,
well, and the way you would do that is if I'm assuming you would close because the client has withdrawn, or
or just fallen
whatever.
off the face of the earth.
Right. Okay. So your resolution is going to be, I can find it.
Client
Suspended, withdrew. Okay.
Right.
Or outcome unknown, like that.
Right. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and resolve this. Okay. Now we can no longer, well, actually we can. Interesting. Does HOPP work different, Kevin?
Not to the best of my knowledge, it should have closed that all the way out.
Unless it's the...
Yeah, it should have, the moment you close it, it shouldn't have allowed you to go back and counsel anymore.
Well,
but
this isn't closed. No,
yeah.
The case status hasn't been, that's why you have to complete this one too. Withdrew from counseling?
Go ahead and
Okay.
click counseling again,
No.
or?
Should indicate, yeah, see it's suspended.
Okay.
Okay.
So then how do you reactivate?
So what I want to set, well, he can show you how to reactivate the case, but I want to be very clear about reactivating cases, because reactivating cases for the very purpose that Greg did here, where it was suspended, the client withdrew from counseling, and then they come back, that is where reactivation is okay. When you have a case that actually closed, they actually modify their mortgage, but 3 months later they're in trouble again and they come back to you, we don't want you reactivating that case, even though you need to keep the same case number, because if your affiliates are also reporting that information to HUD, or some of them are NeighborWorks organizations and that's getting reported to us, they're going to completely mess up all of those reporting periods by reactivating the case, because every time you reactivate, you actually change the periods that this case was live and how that information gets reported. So we want to be very careful with the reactivate for that.
So in the case where they can't really reactivate it because everything was finalized and actually closed, and then the client comes back 2 or 3 months later saying, I'm not making my payments on this modification, they have to start a new case, is what you're saying,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Yes.
So then they just need to be cognizant if they're going to report to HOPP on that person again.
They have to remember the old case number.
Right.
Right. Which they have. I mean, it's in the system, so it didn't go away. They can
Right.
go to the admin side and case
Yeah,
management.
I was
They'll
gonna,
get the case number.
since there's not only 2 cases in here, Kevin, I was going to use my account to show that.
There you go.
Okay, so here.
You're driving. I'm following.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So here's our Fred Flintstone. If we click on the intake, it gives us a pop-up that says suspended, okay, more than once, okay. There's no active case here. Do not hit the drop-down and select foreclosure mitigation again. That will create a new case. What you need to go is go to counseling, go to the resolution, and reactivate the case that was closed. So
That's
again,
in a case where it's acceptable to do that.
in this,
Where it's
because
acceptable
they
to do
withdrew.
that, right.
Yes, the client walked
Right.
away, they withdrew, whatever. Now they're coming back to continue the process. Yes, okay. So again, if you see this where it says select a service and type, it's been suspended, do not hit this and reselect mortgage default. That will create a whole new case. Okay?
Right. And then the suspended, you don't want to do that. You can go back and reactivate the suspended.
Yeah. And to do that, you go to counseling, your case resolution, reactivate, okay?
And that'll open that guy back up. But in the instance where your people have actually closed out a case, we're not reactivating that. We're creating a new case. Because you're going to mess up all the other reporting that you have in the system by doing that.
There we go. So now we have everything back, okay?
So hopefully that's clear as mud, right?
Yeah. You can remove this date then if you want. Okay, I deleted the date. I'm changing it back to select one and saving. Okay, and if we look at resolution, well, it saved it. There is no resolution. Didn't remove the date. Maybe I didn't. There, it did. I just didn't have it all highlighted when I deleted it. So, we clear on that?
So, in the instance, Ellie, to go back to your question, where they have had to create a new case because the old one was closed out, just getting the old case number, because again, it has to be reported to you via the same case number that they had originally reported. That new HOPP report that they're reporting, they're just going to have to go in on the Excel sheet and update the case number back to the original case number for your reporting, because CouncilMax is obviously going to put out the brand new case number that's in the system for that.
Right. Understood.
Okay.
Are there any questions, Alex, that need to be addressed?
I do. So we have a question. So the question is, what happens to all of our previous reports and data that does not reflect our cases accurately because we didn't know this information? For example, the services provided are documented, but in the log, if the counselor does not label it as an appointment, will it not report? Most of the time, the log is labeled as miscellaneous.
So yeah, we've covered that. They're going to have to go back and change all of the. You don't have to re-put them back in the system, but you need to change how you label them. So if they're labeled as miscellaneous, you can go back and move them to appointments and save them. So where he's editing whatever you called that subject, you just need to move it to the appointment and save it, and CouncilMax will then have a record of that. So they don't have to re-enter the log notes or anything else and put it back in the system, but you will have to change the subject.
Right. So log entries, okay, it said miscellaneous. We're going to click edit. We're going to change it back to appointment and save. That's all you have to do. On calendars, go ahead.
What I'm going to say is that I think one of the big questions for some of the grantees will be, okay, so I fixed that, but that appointment happened in a previous reporting period, and I have not since seen that person, but I want to get them counted because they obviously didn't get counted the last time. So I think that's really, I might be wrong, but I think that's part of the question that's being asked. How do we get into our report and get credit for people who we didn't correctly have in the report previously? And that's something that Alex and I can discuss and then maybe do kind of a general email to the Counselor Max users about it.
Sure. And we're early April, so I'm assuming your March reports are due. Let's say this was a February issue. They would go in to make the change and rerun February and send it to you. But they're going to have to let you know that they've changed their February data.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what Alex and I need to talk about. So please, anybody on the phone, don't do that. I'll let you know what to do to fix anybody that you may have missed.
Great. And just to clarify, Kevin and Greg, you guys are going to clarify how the service date is derived, correct? Just to ensure that it
yeah, that's something we have to take back because that's a much broader issue. Again, that's a across-the-board Counselor Max issue for us to change something like that. So that's something we'll
well, no, they're talking about on their report the service is, and I'm 99% sure it comes from the date of the appointment or the calendar or log. Reading the data dictionary, it has to be. That's the only, because there's no field. It has to look at the last appointment for that client. There's no other way. What I did send to the developer already while we were on this call is clarification on the total time spent, if it is a reporting period or a cumulative per case. Okay, he may come back with a clarifying question, but I've already sent that to them asking how that's derived.
So it's actually 3 we're going to walk away with. So it's that one, the service date, and then of course we have to talk about the origination date being derived. So those are the 3 that we have to go back and get definitive answers for you on.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
No problem.
We have one question about the finance link. When Joni, okay, when they populate that link, the info has caused errors for other reports, and they have not been able to populate it at all.
So Joni is going to have to explain a little bit than that. What here is causing? So it's not causing a problem for HOPP, but it's causing a problem on other reporting. Are we talking NFMC? Are we talking?
Bear with me, Joni. I'm going to unmute you. I'm going to try to unmute you so you can clarify that question. Joni, are you there?
And Ellie, I just got your question, and so that is really something that's going to be down the road, but we can talk about the process that we're going through right now, but that's nothing that's going to happen in the next 3 months, 2 months. No. That's like a year down the road.
No, I know. I'm aware of that, but if you could just talk a little bit about it, it would be great.
Okay.
Well, actually, we're just starting to discuss that ourselves, and we had an initial call yesterday on how we want to go about it. Do we want to have where it's more user-controlled, where there's a bunch of generic data points, and then you get to create a label for them and indicate whether they're required or not on separate screens? If we have like the bottom of standard screens where you could, drag and drop some different. There's tons of possibilities. It's what's feasible, what's affordable. Depends on the system we go with to drive the new system, drive the new, the next gen product. There's so much up in the air. But we are painfully aware, I shouldn't say painfully, we are very aware of the need for the customization, and not just for HOPP. There's other customizations.
Right, there are other customizations that we have, but we've got to figure out what that next version is going to look like altogether. So I'm afraid we have more questions than we have answers at this particular point.
Right.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to make the users aware that you guys are clearly aware of some of the user issues with Counselor Max, and you're looking at that.
Oh yeah, we have consultants that are actually in wrapping up a business requirements document, and they've interviewed every intermediary, or not every, but the intermediaries, the users, the business units, everything to figure out what's its strengths, what's its shortcomings, what would be the desired, what's a must. So it's a pretty big undertaking, but that's in the works now. So, but yeah, we've heard from many of the users, and they have even more than Kevin and I have, on what they really would like to see, what they do like, what they don't like, things like that. So yeah, we're very much aware of all that, and are taking all that into consideration.
Great.
Okay.
That's all. I
users,
kind of wanted
yeah.
everybody a heads up that, NeighborWorks is listening.
Oh yeah,
We
very
are.
much. And it's not going to be, and it's not going to be Counselor Max 2.0 or anything like that. I mean, they're talking about a
brand new system.
Yeah, a CRM, a CMS, all combined. They're talking about how we're going to do custom reports. Are we going to be able to include mapping, charting? I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at the management reports that just came out.
I was getting ready to say, so Council Max is changing under their nose, Ellie, and I don't know how many people are paying attention to it, but we're constantly listening, and we're constantly putting enhancements there. If Greg closes this and just clicks into the reporting section of Council Max here, we've added in all the new management reports. And so as I was talking earlier, we were talking about time and how those things are being spent. We created management reports that get you to a lot of that data that people were asking for. For instance, with our executive summary report here, when Greg pitched the time period, we've designed the system to give the organizations quick snapshots of the information that they're really asking for without having to go in and build these customized reports that they're accustomed to doing. But we realize that we get different variations of that information. I'm sorry?
Let me switch to mine so that I can.
Okay, yeah. So to have some more data.
A little more meaningful.
So yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that obviously the user experience is our primary goal there. And so as you said, Ellie, we do listen. Obviously, we want to make sure that you're having good user experiences in the system. And this is some of the things that we've done in regards to that. As we hear areas of where you need to make some improvement, or we can't get to the information that we're looking for, we've created CAN reports that really you just select the filtering criteria, and then Counselor Max will pull that in, because we realized that the customized reporting section wasn't as intuitive as a lot of people would like. And so we heard the complaints about that, and so we started building the reports for you so that you would be able to go into the system. And this executive summary here, is a quick snapshot. The number of new clients based on your reporting period, how many cases you've created there, how many cases you closed in that particular period. Then we're going to give you all the active cases. So this is the one where date range doesn't apply. And so as we talk about that cumulative number, it's going to give you all the cases that right now are open in your system, regardless of the time frame that you're looking at. Because we went back and forth, but most agencies said, I just want to know what's open. And so that gives you that snapshot. You look at total education attendance, so the number of clients that have completed the educational requirement. And when we talk about that one, that's the HUD educational requirement. The number of one-on-one counseling appointments that are in the system, and then, of course, the number of total one-on-one counseling hours. And so those are actually pulling from both the log as well as the calendar, and that's something that Greg was showing you even for the HOPP report. Council Max is looking at both of those locations for some of the different services. But in your case, it's got to be termed an actual appointment. This is going to pull all of the events that would appear in the system there for that report. And so, Greg, you can close that. And we're not going to bore you with all the management reports there, because there are actual WebExes that are set up to go over that. But you can see case activity by service types, the report by counselor. We have counselor activity reports, which a lot of people wanted to look at, and that one doesn't have any education. And then, Ellie, you said something earlier about the 60-day requirement, and you were talking about where they're not necessarily going to know that they haven't seen a client in the last 60 days, the last 45 days. Well, this report is exactly what they should be using, because it's going to let you know how many times you've touched the client in the last 60 days or the last 45 days or the last 10 days, so that no clients are actually falling through the cracks here And so it's going to show me all of my in process. And Greg, you can go ahead and run that.
I just wanted to point out.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out real quick. There are some filters. There's some preset ones, but you can change them. It's going to, do the counselor ascending or A to Z instead of Z to A. We're talking the number of 60 days. If you wanted to know how many clients hadn't been seen in 30 days, you can change that. But as default, it's going January 1st to December 31st. I prefer to use the HUD fiscal year, and by default, it's only showing in process. But you could change that. Okay, but you can change that, and you can export it to Excel. But we'll just go ahead and run this.
And so this is going to let you know for those that need to be in compliance, not only those that need to be in compliance with the 60-day requirements, but if you have your own standard in your agency that you say we should be talking to somebody every 20 days, this report will allow you to find out all the people that you haven't touched in the last 20 days that are active open cases, and you might want to follow up with that. So this goes along the lines of some of the things you were talking about, Ellie, and I was just I was saying, for the HOPP report, we built it exactly the way you said you needed to get it, but a lot of this data is available in the other areas of Counselor Max, so that you can see a much broader picture than just what's going in to the HOPP fields that you all are collecting. And so when we talk about time, agencies can go to these reports and actually see the amount of time they're spending in particular activities, even though those don't populate the same way into the HOPP report. By using the customized reports that we have here, they'll be able to see that. And so this particular report, again, is showing all the activity over the last 60 days based on the time period that Greg pulled, which was the HUD fiscal year. And so we can see here it's broken out. You got counselors, the specific services. It's going to give you every client ID number, every case number for the client. And then, of course, the main column is how many days old. So it's letting you know that, this is 188 days old, 180 days old. It tells you exactly the last event that you put in Counselor Max. And then it's going to tell you what that event was, whether it was a class, it was something that was an appointment in the log, we did financial capability, you had a calendar appointment, whatever the case may be. That last contact that you have with the client is going to show that for you, giving you the last name and the first name for the client. And it's even going to give you the case term. So was it midterm? Is this a long-term client for your agency? Is it something that's short-term? So you'll be able to see all of the information. So I just wanted to point that out, and I know we kind of went away from the things that we were doing, but I wanted to point out that there were a number of other things that your agencies can use to get to some of the other data that they're really looking for in the system. And we are hearing that, and so that's where the management reports have come from, because we're building those things based on their own recommendations and what they're trying to actually get out of the system.
Notice,
this one
just
here,
real quick,
Greg, you want to go ahead? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that notice that they are drill down reports, and this has affected custom reports too, correct, Kevin?
Correct. So all your custom reports now are going to look like this. Yeah.
But so if you just wanted to see what's the makeup of Erica's education, you could just click the one. Jose's mortgage default, you could click it. All of Jose's, it's all unassigned counselors. You can look at them all. Or you can just click the expand all up above, okay? Notice it's got the total number of cases under that category at the right-hand column. And again, this is all exportable to Excel, so if you wanted to do more analysis and stuff with them, that can be done. We're not going to get into all these. Kevin and I are just using this opportunity to kind of show you guys some of the new changes. One thing I do want to cover is we talked about the client number being fixed. In other words, the client for life. They come in, they have a client ID, it never changes. What changes is their case numbers as the customer completes one service and comes back for another, and we can look at their history through admin, case management. Okay? You can filter by a lot of things. I'm just going to say okay, so I see the world. Okay? So here we see, let's get into some names, okay? Maybe we can find some duplicates here, like Ron DeFreitas, okay? There's same client number, but several different case numbers, okay? So, and then it tells you what the services, what the cases were, okay? It's just customization that was done here, healthcare, but then there's a home purchase and rental and counseling. Okay, so those were all the cases that shows you that, if they were resolved, what was the date. So always remember that you can come in here, look up any closed case, any active case. If the case is closed, you can come over here and click on Edit. Okay, the general specifics on the closed case can be modified right here. Okay, like resolution, service type, all those things. You can come in here into the actual GPS, okay, change things as necessary. I hit the wrong thing.
So, yeah.
There was no GPS on that particular one. Okay.
So,
and the same thing, you notice that there was a delete button. So if you accidentally created, when I said you shouldn't give it a new service type, you should go to the counseling screen and to reactivate the case. If you would have created a second case by mistake, you can come in here, find it, and hit delete, so that you don't have that data in the system twice to potentially mess up reports. It doesn't really delete them. You'll just see them on this with red lines through them, but if they were deleted, they will not be included in any reports. So if you click the red delete item, it'll undelete it. It doesn't tell you that, but that's what it does.
Right.
Okay, so before we lose everybody, because we're well over 1 hour, we're heading into 1 3/4 hours. I just want to ask Alex if there's any questions that people have put forward.
There have not been any additional questions. I just want to pass along props for the management reports. People have they've been really helpful, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's more coming, by the way.
There's one question I do want to ask. I had pointed out, and I think a couple of the groups called the help desk about a zip code issue, a zip code county issue.
I had one. The thing is we don't have any control over that. HUD controls the MSA area based on zip code, so it may not be by the county name, because oftentimes there's more than one county in a metropolitan statistical area. So
that's when you put in a zip code, say for an area in Orange County, it'll pull Albany because it's part of the Albany MSA?
Correct. Zip codes are like,
we don't set those.
Yeah. Now, one thing to note, if there's more than one MSA in the zip code, we list all that are within that zip code, because that is often a case. So a particular zip code may have 2 to 3 different MSAs, depending on the size or where it's at, in which case they're going to have to select which one of the display. Well, if there's only one, it's going to default to the one. But if there's more than one, there'll be a drop down, and they'll have to select which particular MSA Okay. What am I doing wrong here, Kevin?
I have lost my visual. My laptop actually died, so I can't see it.
Oh, it's down at the bottom. Okay. So this particular zip code is Washington, D.C. Notice it covers D.C., Virginia, and Maryland.
Correct.
Okay. So based on the zip code entered, it's going to give you all that apply within that zip code. And it's all based on the HUD income limits chart. So you can always, if you're in doubt, you could go to the HUD income limits website and you can enter it on screen. You can also download an Excel spreadsheet with it, which is what we use to populate all of it anyways.
And you can't manually put anything in there, can you?
No, you cannot, because we have to map to the HUD income limits. Okay, I don't know that we've ended the 14 yet.
Because remember, the area median income is pulling from that data as well. So that's what he's saying. It maps to HUD. So.
And that's okay. So,
I think
okay.
I think what was happening, and unfortunately we lost a couple of the grantees who expressed this issue, yet they were entering in a zip code for their client residing in Albany, yet the county was showing like Monroe or something like that. So it's doing something kind of quirky in regards to the zip code, and the zip code was actually in Albany County, yet the county was pulling as Monroe.
So in an instance like that, if they have other cases that have addresses near the client that the county has changed, then that's something we want to look at. But if everybody's coming out the same way and it's not Albany but it's that other county, it's because that's the only one in the system. And we're not actually picking those. Those are given to us.
Well, I'll let you know. I mean, you're not from New York State, but Albany County is on the other side of the state from Monroe County, so they're not in the same MSA. There's no possible way.
And there's no way they can be in. There's no way they can be in the same zip code.
No.
Okay. Is there any chance there was a typo in the zip code,
right,
or a transposition? Because the same thing, if there's more than one, because some zip codes are shared by different cities as well. And if that's the case, when you type in the zip code, it's going to this is going to switch to a drop down, and then it'll list all the cities within that particular zip code. And then when you get to the case screen, it's going to, again, based on the zip code and possibly the city, affect the MSA area. It's rare that that happens, but there are, and we've had to code for it. Okay, so zip codes can be multiple cities, and cities and zip codes can have multiple MSAs, depending. Okay, so if it happens again, contact the help desk,
right,
and ask them to escalate it to me. I manage this aspect of it, so I can take a look. But I've had a ticket, I think, that came through with Erica or Carlos, one of them, last week or the week before on this. And when I looked it up, they were looking for a particular MSA, a particular county. When it was the MSA, it didn't match. You know, it wasn't the name. The MSA area wasn't the same name as the county name, and it kind of just threw them off.
So yeah, we you know, if it's something that can be replicated as a real error, then we definitely want that escalated to us. So just let us know when that happens again.
Okay, perfect.
Well, I guess if there's nothing else, we can close up. And thanks again, Greg and Kevin, for taking the time and staying for extra time with us. We really appreciate that. And we'll be doing this again on Friday with Greg.
All right. No problem.
Okay.
We thank you all.
All right, great.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks, Greg.
Bye-bye. Yep.